Okay,
Glad to do it. Bow our heads.
thank you.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the time to study your word as we go through Matthew, God. We just ask that you reveal this gospel to us and of course, accomplishing the big goal of revealing yourselves to us. In Christ's name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. So this morning, we're moving on in Matthew to a section that focuses, where Jesus is giving instructions on discipleship. And I want us to make sure that we're following. Can you hear me, Charlene? Okay, good. You looked worried, so I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, the TV's not working. Yeah, not wanting to connect for some reason. So I want to make sure everybody follows that there's a plot here. I think sometimes we're reading in scripture and we kind of, it's just I'm reading Holy Scripture, and we forget that there is actually a narrative going on here. So let's think about how we get here. We've started with obviously with the pre-birth story, the genealogy, the birth, and then we skip forward in time to his cousin John the Baptist working in the wilderness and Jesus' baptism. Then after the baptism, right, which is Jesus, I'll say is sort of an ordination, so to speak. That would be the closest comparable thing we have now. Then he experiences spiritual assault. He's made a commitment. Now I'm diving in. I'm really going to go do what the Lord has called me to do and be who the Lord has called me to be. And he experiences spiritual assault. And he successfully traverses that wilderness experience. And he calls some disciples to assist him in his work. And then we spent a good bit of time on his inaugural address as Matthew presented the Sermon on the Mount. This is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do. And then he follows. Matthew follows that up with him coming down off the mountain in chapter 8, and he performs great miracles, right? That themselves enact the restoration of Israel and the ingathering of the nations, right? In other words, or what he said his administration is going to do, what his kingdom is going to look like on behalf of God the Father. And so I want us to from there get into why today's events happen. In last week's session, with all these miracles, all these mighty acts, mostly healings, packed into about a chapter and a half. What was your feeling of the pace there of events?
Well,
Is it slow?
I kind of
deliberate.
Very deliberate, yes. Kathy?
just, I mean, he kind of, I mean, it was just, he had
Absolutely.
a plan, and he, today, like, he empowered his disciples, then he told them their mission, then he.
Well, last week, think about last week, don't think about this week,
Okay.
right? So is there any downtime between any of these mighty acts?
Mhm.
No, none at all. It's like boom, 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 boom. And people are coming to him, right? And it gets so frenzied at one point. Remember, he's on his way to one healing, and what happens?
Somebody else sidetracks him.
Right.
They need him.
Right. And this is a guy who's got a full plate.
Yeah.
Right? Well, if you're an able administrator and your plate is full to the point you've got no downtime, you've got no time to do forward planning, you are completely in the trenches constantly, what do?
Delegate.
Delegate. Exactly. And so let's look at the opening of today's passage, chapter 9, verses 35 to 38. And let's see what really kind of tips him over to set up today's events. Somebody read for us, chapter 9, verses 35 through 38.
Jesus continued going around to all the towns and villages, teaching to their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest."
Okay, so what happened? What has tipped him over the edge to set things up for today's events? So many people, so many people. And notice what he's trying to do. He's trying to teach and preach and heal. The last week's passage, did he have time to teach at all? No. And for Matthew, remember what's the most important thing? He's teaching, right? So, but then he looks, what does he do in verse 38? He sees the crowds, and what is his response?
Too many of these people, they don't have a shepherd. So
Yeah. What's the word he had? Compassion. He's like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And then he tells his disciples, right? This is another great administrator. Instead of going, oh my gosh, the job is too big, what does he see? He doesn't see a problem. He sees opportunity. And so he has his, I love this. Y'all pray for workers. And by the way,
You're going.
yeah. Yeah. Jesus, they say Jesus didn't have a sense of humor. So yeah. And notice I love, Cedric, that you leaned into that first word in verse 37, then, which is not just a chronological, but it's also therefore. So then he responds to what he sees, this tremendous need that he sees. And he calls his disciples in chapter 10 and gave them authority, right? You use the perfect word, you delegate, right? And we've already learned what did that centurion say about himself and about Jesus?
Yeah, I
Under authority, right? So now the disciples are also going to be men under authority, under the authority of Jesus. He gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every infirmity. Notice they're not yet authorized to be teachers. And many of us grew up. The names of the 12 apostles were these. And I'm going to read them and let's just dwell over them.
where was that where you said he gave them authority?
Chapter 10, verse 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Because these are the apostles. These are the men whose testimony gave rise to the faith that we live. They are the witnesses. First, Simon, who is called Rock, and Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, and Matthew, the tax collector. Right, we've already met him. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed.
That's foreshadowing.
Yeah. These are very real people, right? So Jesus commands them in chapter 10, verse 5. And he shows his authority by telling them where to go and where not to go. And notice that he says, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why? Does Jesus just not want the Gentiles to get there?
I think he wants to start with the Jewish people.
And why?
Because those are his people.
Those are his people,
God's chosen.
God's chosen people. And what just happened that we read at the end of chapter 9? What just happened?
Crowds,
And Jesus had
compassion,
why?
there were no shepherd.
No shepherd.
No shepherd. And what does he call them in chapter 10, verse 6?
Lost sheep.
The lost sheep, right? Job one is to restore Israel. That's the Messiah's first job, restore Israel. We already know, right? He's had an encounter with that Roman centurion and said, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And he fulfills the man's request to heal his servant. And Jesus has no idea, is the servant Jewish, Greek, Roman, Scythian, Parthian? He doesn't know. It's just somebody that this guy came and said, please help it. But Jesus is not saying, I don't want the gospel to go to the Gentiles. He is responding to the immediate need that he saw and to his understanding of his job. His first task is to restore Israel. That's where it's got to start. You're absolutely right, Kathy. That's where it's got to start. So, and in verse 7, what are they supposed to preach?
The gospel.
Proclaim the message, kingdom of heaven has
Exactly. And who was the first person in Matthew who preached that?
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist. And then Jesus, right. And now his disciples are being sent out to say the same message. And so they're going to preach and they're going to heal in verse 8. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You received without paying and give without pay. Why do you think they are not to take provisions?
Because he's trying to instill in them, you need to trust God.
Yeah, he is. Again, stick close to the verse.
Which verse?
Verse 8, chapter 10, verse 8.
You received without pay, give without pay.
Yes,
And they deserve their food.
right. So he's gonna let them be paid.
Freely
Right,
you receive.
right.
Freely you
But freely you received, freely you should give. Because the good news is all about grace, right? So you receive freely, you should give freely. Right? And what does he say? It's really striking. What custom do we see in verse 12?
Loot the house as you enter it.
Yeah. Be hospitable, show good manners, right? It's just good etiquette of the time. Yeah, and your peace, let your peace upon it. What was the Jewish word?
Shalom.
Shalom. So you enter the house and say shalom. Shalom. Right?
And when Jesus came, he always, my peace be with you.
Yes,
So
yes,
that's,
yes.
he said the
Shalom.
example.
Shalom.
There you go.
Notice though, if their word is not received in chapter 10, verses 14 and 15.
It's the book of Eve.
Yeah, and what dramatic act?
Shake the dust.
Shake the dust off. Yeah, that is a prophetic dramatic act, right? I'm shaking you off. Do you know the word in Aramaic? And it's also the word in Arabic to shake dust off. Intifada. Intifada. So that's where that term comes from. Intifada. somebody read for us, where we go next, 10:16, as Jesus continues to teach about discipleship. 10:16.
See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves.
Thank you. All right. What irony do you see in that instruction there compared to chapter 9, verse 36?
Pleasure.
Compassion versus shrewdness.
Yeah. And what is a flock of sheep that doesn't have a shepherd at risk of?
Being lost.
Yes,
Killed.
being killed.
Yeah, because the wolves will get them.
Right. Right. So there's no shepherd out there. You're going to go in and you're going to be as innocent as those sheep, but you're going to be savvy. Right. Right.
I got street smarts.
Be wise as serpents.
He doesn't say that you'll be in the midst of enemies. He even uses the word wolves.
Exactly.
So they can really get it.
Exactly. Exactly. And Matthew does that so we can get it, right? What is Matthew saying about discipleship?
You're gonna get beat up.
Yeah, there is risk. There's very real risk.
Just beware, because they will hand you over the horse.
Yeah.
And flog you in the synagogues.
Notice though that Jesus is making very clear, you're going to be in a hostile world, but I don't want you to be like that hostile world, right? So far, what have we learned about discipleship?
It's a tough job.
Tough job, but what were we given right at the get-go? Authority, right?
Smarts.
Yep, smarts. And it's authority to do some pretty remarkable things, right? And we are to proclaim the coming of the kingdom. Look, yeah, there is that long passage, Cedric, that you mentioned about you're going to be delivered up. Don't be anxious about what you just speak or what you say. The Lord will give that to you. Your own brother will, and father and children will turn against you. What does that tell us about the congregation to which Matthew is writing?
If they're hostile. But they're not believers or.
Well, the congregation to whom he is writing, his community,
They're fearful.
Oh, at all.
they have experienced this. There are people who are part of Matthew's community to whom he is writing and for whom he is writing, who have lived through persecution that cut through families. That does a lot to trust. Smashes it, right? And yes, creates fear. So Matthew is including all this to affirm, yeah, this is part of the job. This is not a reason to get discouraged or to say, not what I signed up for, and clearly God isn't really in charge. This is exactly what you signed up for. This is exactly what Jesus said to experience. And we're going to be reminded as the story goes on, right, that this is what's going to happen to Jesus himself. We're really getting at the heart, probably, of why Matthew wrote this book. Because this is a community and a congregation that really needs teaching about their own discipleship. What lesson do we learn in 10:24? Somebody read that verse for us.
The disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master.
Thank you. In other words, the Matthean community, now the disciples don't understand because they haven't yet seen the crucifixion, right? But the readers know Jesus is going to be crucified. Why should I expect any better?
Oh, never saw that.
right? And Jesus goes on to say, well, if they've called me a master of the house of Beelzebub, because we have seen that already, right? We've seen him accused of being able to cast out demons because he keeps company with demons. Well, if they say that about me, well, how much more are they going to say that about people who follow me, people who are part of my household? You see the plot going here? He's preparing these disciples based on the experience that he's already had, and he's telling them what to expect. So in verse 26, what's the remarkable statement?
Therefore.
So have no fear. Have no fear of them. Remarkable statement. What additional assurances does Jesus offer in verses 10 to 31?
Well, it tells them that, if they, wait, I'm not sure.
You said 26 to 31?
Mm-hmm.
God
Chapter
knows
10,
and
verse
God
26.
cares.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, say that.
God knows and God cares.
Yes,
And don't be afraid.
A
yes,
little bit earlier, he tells them if they endure, they will be saved.
yes. And what does he say in 32?
Therefore, you will acknowledge me before others. I will acknowledge him before my Father in heaven.
Exactly. I will acknowledge you. And what does it mean for the one who is the head of the administration to acknowledge you? You're important, and you have a place at the seat, a seat at the table. You're an insider. You're assured a place in that kingdom. You're not that person that we heard about earlier who's just going to say, Lord, oh Lord, but never actually knew Jesus. You acknowledge me before men, I will acknowledge you before my Father. I'll vouch for you. Let's looking at that 32 and 33. We've talked about one of the themes of Matthew is, oh gosh, one of these big phrases, the church as the eschatological covenant community. So the community of the end times that is in covenant, in relationship with God. How do those two verses there, 32 and 33, remind us that we, the church, are that eschatological covenant community? There's all this.
I acknowledge you before my father.
Oh,
Excuse me. I not whoever. Yes, I will acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. So
yeah.
they have the authority to do that and the validity.
So Jesus is going to acknowledge them before the throne of heaven. Well, when does that happen?
In the end time.
In the end time, exactly. In judgment, in that day of judgment, right? And of course, part of Jewish eschatology was there are going to be people who are judged righteous, and they're going to be in right relationship with God, and they're going to be people who are judged
Not in right.
not right relationship, right? So this really is showing that stark contrast, that division. Remember the one thing that Jesus did not do in his inaugural address that we expect of an inaugural address was say we're all going to pull together. We're all going to be one happy family. Jesus was living in the real world. Yeah, we're not all one happy family, and we're not going to be all one happy family, because some people are going to choose not to be. And notice, is it the church that makes itself that community? Who is it that makes the church be the eschatological covenant community? Through Jesus, right? It's through Jesus. It's not our own doing. We don't make ourselves be that covenant community. It's through God's work, through Jesus, that we are made that eschatological covenant community. Let's look at chapter 10, verses 34 through 39. Somebody read that for us. And then we're going to compare it to chapter 8, verse 21 and 22.
Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it.
Thank you. I want to put a little context here.
Please.
Remember, we've already had the encounter of the young man who said, well, let me go bury my dad first, right? And Jesus is like, well, you've got to put me first, right? You got to put me first. Again, think about the context of this community. Persecution, people trying to turn each other in within families. If your father, I'm going to say this specifically you had a very authoritarian dad. Like I had a very, I am in charge of this house kind of dad, right?
And he rules supreme.
Right. If somebody like that, or let's say your mother, whom you love dearly and to whom you owe your very life, or your brother or your sister who's your best friend looks at you and says, you have got to leave this movement, this whatever you call yourself, sect.
Oh, okay.
You have got to leave. Or I'm not going to have a relationship with you anymore. I can't. You will be dead to me. That's tough. Jesus is saying, yeah, no. You've got to be willing to look at him and say, that's your choice. But I have to do it. I have to follow my God. So this is not some forever, always, I'm here to destroy families. This is, I am here as a judge. And people are going to choose for me or they're going to choose against me. And that does have consequences. They're choosing to break their relationship with you because they won't have a relationship with me, right? Remember the word righteous, right? Relationship with God and with humanity.
There's a line in a Dylan song that says, you're either for me or against me. There ain't no neutral ground.
Right.
And that's
right. So it's important to have that context there, right? Okay. So he who does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And here, a lot of us, in the South especially, well, that's just my cross to bear, my brother can be so hard to deal with, or my job can be just so demanding, or that neighbor that I take care of and she just doesn't appreciate me. That's just my cross to bear. No, that's not what Jesus is talking about. He says, you got to be willing to give up your life. And that may not mean die, but that may mean
It means your whole life.
your old life.
It means your new life will cost you your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. And at that time, right, if you're cut off from your family, you now have no job, you have nowhere to live, you have no connections, you have no prospects, you got nothing. So you've got to be willing to give up everything, yes, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of your Lord. So let's look back at chapter 8, verses 21 and 22. I've already mentioned it, but somebody read this.
Lord, another of his disciples said, first, let me bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead.
Does this give context to why Jesus said that?
Kinda, but it's still a little bit,
It's tough.
it's still a little flat how he gets into it. But I think a little bit of explanation. Because how he says it, I'm here to turn this one against that one,
Yeah.
this one against that
Yeah.
one. And it makes it feel like you're reading it like that's his purpose. But it doesn't give that part.
Yeah.
You know.
And here is where we have the disadvantage of being 21st century Americans who are looking back at AD first century Middle East and not understanding the culture, right? And this guy is saying, well, I have an obligation, right? The highest good you can do for anybody is to bury them because they cannot return that kindness. And Jesus is saying, no, there's a higher duty. And he may be, and again, people in this congregation may be saying, well, I'm next in line to be the head of the household. So let me just hang back until dad dies.
Right.
And then I can be free. So this call to discipleship is complete, it's utter, as you say, your old life has got to die to make room for this new life. And it is of supreme calling. It has got to be our supreme allegiance. In chapter 10, going back to chapter 10, the last few verses, somebody read that for us. And let's think about how that passage shows discipleship as both recognizing who Jesus is and mirroring Jesus. So somebody read for us verses, chapter 10, verse 40 to the end of the chapter.
He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet because he is a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he who receives a righteous man because he is a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives to one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he shall not lose his reward.
Thank you. So how does this passage show discipleship as a way that we mirror Jesus? We do what Jesus did.
I mean, throughout teaching and ministering, they receive you, they receive God.
Yes. And so we are doing what Jesus did, right? We are teaching, we are extending kindness, we are doing what Jesus did. How does this also, let's flip it. He who receives a prophet because he's a prophet. Well, who's the prophet?
Jesus.
Yeah. Who is the righteous man? Jesus, right? He who receives a righteous man because he is a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. So it's interesting. It's a two-sided affirmation about discipleship. So let's summarize. What have we learned about discipleship?
It's hard.
Yes.
It's going to cost you something.
Yep.
But you have authority.
Yes. And
salvation comes if you do what you're supposed to.
and we have a reward because of our being claimed by Jesus as disciples.
And I believe the reward is salvation.
And it is, yeah, it's relationship with God, right? And I think, and I agree with you. One thing I think that we have to be careful of is that we recognize that that's not just in heaven. Right? Salvation is now. Job said, yet in my flesh will I see God. The kingdom is at hand. And new life in Jesus begins now, right? That's why you got to give up the old life now so the new life can start. Right? It's not just a heavenly reward. you used to hear the expression, somebody who's so heaven-minded, they're no earthly good, right? Salvation, discipleship, all starts here. Becoming a disciple is itself salvation. Because otherwise, what are you?
Lost sheep.
Or a wolf. Absolutely. Absolutely. So being called into that new life is salvation from that fear. Absolutely. Anything else we learned about discipleship you want to share? Yeah, it could get ugly. I have a friend who works in a mission organization that works with clandestine missionaries in Muslim countries. And one year when she came back to Atlanta she was based in the UK, she's American, but she came to America on a trip to touch base with supporters. And she said, I'm not going to tell you the country. I'm just gonna say Russia. It wasn't Russia. It's a Muslim nation. We had no martyrs this year.
I remember you saying.
And it's a stark thing to hear because it was big news. We have brothers and sisters across the planet who are in prison right now because of their faith and who may never get out. People who are dragged out of their homes. We're so blessed to live in a nation where we have freedom. And notice too, why are there disciples?
Because there's so many people need to be reached.
Bingo. And Jesus, in his grace, because he's a good administrator, and B, in his grace, he shares the work with us. God has chosen to save us who are flesh through the flesh. Jesus became incarnate, and through us, the kingdom continues to become incarnate. Jesus didn't have to do it that way. God didn't have to do it that way. He didn't have to include us in the process. He could have just gone,
A story, and it's too much time, but anyhow, it's a story, and the way it ends is that our lives are the best witness we can give. It's a job out of love, we treat others.
I'd like to share finally, now that I have audio and everything, what happened to my family this week, because it fits right in with today's lesson. Is that okay? Yeah.
Charlene.
So you all heard about the avalanche in Tahoe. Well, my son, his wife, 5-week-old baby, 3-year-old son, and 5-year-old daughter got caught in that storm. They were in an Airbnb house in Arnold, California, which is probably an hour away from Tahoe. They were in the foothills. They weren't supposed to have any storm. When they arrived on Monday, there was no snow, and they weren't expecting any. Well, on Tuesday night, the storm came through, and they woke up with 4 feet of snow on Wednesday morning. So they went to bed with none, and they woke up with 4 feet. So by that point, they couldn't get out of the house. They couldn't leave like they were planning to the next day. So they were trying to pack up and get out, but they couldn't get the car out. And then there were all these trees. So anyway, trying to shortcut it a little bit, power was out. There was no heat. They didn't have enough food. They just planned for a couple of days. And here they have a 5-week-old baby, in addition to trying to keep her warm. So my son had to go from house. Nobody else was in the neighborhood. he had to go from house to house and steal firewood to be able to burn enough to keep their family somewhat warm and to heat any water to try to cook something for them. And anyway, it was Good Samaritans who wound up saving them, retrieving them. But Rick spent 2 days here trying to be a go-between because Zach didn't have any power to be able to charge his phones, and they would just leave the phones on for a few minutes and alternate his and hers and go out to the truck and recharge. But I could send you pictures. I think I did to Mary Elizabeth, but there was no way they could handle this on their own. So anyway, through a friend in the San Francisco Bay Area who owns a house in the same city, but like 4 miles away. Between Rick and Pat, my friend, they contacted, and Pat could see drones because she owns a house on this other side, even though she was in the Bay Area. So she was feeding Rick information, but we couldn't get it directly to Zach. So Rick was contacting every county service, every government agency, every individual snowplow operator, anybody he could figure out to contact. And so we told Zola about it. She had been at work. And so this would be Friday afternoon, I think, finally. Anyway, that she got on, I think Facebook, but on social media, and she found somebody who lived 1/10 of a mile from where they were stranded. And then this person contacted others and a few others. So anyway, this woman sent her son through the snow to bring them a little bit of food because they had run out. And then that person contacted somebody else who had a snowmobile. So the next morning, somebody else brought some food to help tide them over. Because now the stores are open, you can't get to them. All the trees are down, limbs are down, power's down, power lines. So anyway, yesterday, another Good Samaritan comes with his bobcat, small tractor, and he helps clear enough path for just Zach to get his truck out. He had a 4-wheel drive truck, but to get it to one of the main roads so that they could get out. The county wasn't going to be there till next week. The power wasn't going to be restored till next Friday. And again, there's all these trees down, so nobody's going to come to this little neighborhood to try to help them. And so it was all Good Samaritans. And this cat operator, helped them get to a passable street. And then took them several more hours to get out of the area because of all the tree limbs. But they did. And they made it home last night to their own warm house and everything. So we are so thankful. And each of these people, none of them knew them, It was all people helping people and lots of prayer. So we appreciate everyone who prayed for them because it all made a difference.
Darlene, thank you so much for sharing that. And we're so glad, we're just so glad that they are home safe and sound.
And so still pray for other people who are trapped, and may not have, that others may not know. So we still need to pray for all the workers and the people who are trapped. So thank you.
Of course. Well, next week, the plot continues. And Jesus, while his disciples are out healing and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom being at hand, or I should say the call to decision, Jesus is going to get into some controversies over his authority. So that will be where we turn our attention next week. So go in peace to be a disciple. Yeah, to serve the Lord. Bye, Charlene.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes.